CJ Szafir, and Weston Wamp. He's the founder of Millienial Debt Project. Good morning to both of you.
Hey, good to be with you.
Good morning. How's it going?
I am good. We'll start with you, CJ. Tell us what's happening and what the goal of this project is going to be here.
Yeah, sure. Well, the Institute for Reforming Government is thrilled to partner up with Weston and his organization, the Millienial Debt Foundation, that he can speak of. But we'll be holding a live event at the Bradley Foundation Friday, tomorrow, broadcasted from the Bradley Foundation at 1 o'clock Central. And we're going to be hearing from a whole host of prominent state and national leaders, including Congressman Mike Gallagher, Congressman Brian Stile, former Governor Scott Walker, and also bipartisan. The Evers administration will be there with Revenue Secretary Barca and also Republican State Representative John Mocco from Green Bay. And we're all united around discussing fiscal responsibility, especially on the economic consequences of the at the federal level and the national debt. But of course, these issues certainly stem at the state level too.
And Weston, I mean, this is something that gets talked about. It used to be talked a lot more by conservatives, the exploding deficit, fiscal responsibility. We've obviously dealt with a pandemic and other challenges where the debt has exploded. Why is it that we can't understand as a country and as taxpayers that this issue is probably a lot more important than all of us realize?
Well, because our politicians are motivated primarily by the short term and reelection, and stewardship is a long-term commitment. That's the short answer, is that we've locked ourselves, and to some extent, I think we, the people, are to blame because we need to expect more and demand more out of both political parties. One of the fascinating aspects of the timing of our organization's launch over the last couple of years is neither party has any credibility on these issues. So we go around the country bringing Republicans and Democrats together to have conversations because there are now ethical and obvious mathematical and economical consequences to the levels of borrowing we're doing. We've branded our organization the Millennial Debt Foundation because the national debt might as well be called the millennial debt. I mean, we're the first generation. I say this as a 34-year-old father of four. We're the first generation that will feel the impacts of the national debt, and we've got to begin to have good faith conversations that cross the political spectrum about whether or not we're willing to return to an era of stewardship where we actually think about and govern for future generations.
And CJ or Weston, either one can take this. I mean, the numbers are stark. At some point, the bill has to be paid here. And to Weston's point about millennials, they are going to be the first group that's going to actually have to pay these bills. Talk about in specifics what we're dealing with here when it comes to just a per-person impact of an exploding national debt on our finances and our economy going forward.
Well, sure. Here, I'll hop in quickly. I mean, the amount per household, you're talking in excess of $100,000. I think the best way that we try to encourage people to think about the problem is you'll hear on the nightly news, the debt is topped $28 trillion, and it's a ever-growing, ever-intimidating amount of money. The biggest problem here, and it's the reason that every day that passes that we don't pursue reforms, the problem only gets worse. Under current law, forget the almost $30 trillion in debt we have today. Under current law, current policy dictates that over the next 30 years, which is basically millennials from their mid-30s to retirement, our country's set to borrow somewhere in excess of $100 trillion. $100 trillion at the absolute bottom of the range. 130, 150 trillion is probably more likely. So that just shows how unsustainable the trajectory is, and we've got to have a grown-up conversation about what level of government we can afford. And, increasingly, we're not even having honest conversations about whether we're going to try to pay for new government. We're just going to cross our fingers and hope that the laws of gravity no longer apply.
We're talking to Weston Wamp. He's the founder of the National Debt Foundation. CJ Szafir, who's been on the show many times before, Institute for Reforming Government. CJ, so what do you hope to accomplish with your live stream at the Bradley Foundation this week?
Well, we're thrilled to partner with Weston. I think, I am so enthusiastic that his group is going around the country, really in every state, trying to organize these important conversations. Look, first off, we all have to agree that there's a problem, and I don't think we all agree at the moment. I think when you can hear politicians and even some economists, what I would say on the far left, that say that we can keep, inflate this away, or just simply, well, we keep spending and nothing is happening. So clearly we can keep doing this. But look, you look at history, even, going back to ancient Rome, or even going back more recently to Greece. At the end of the day, if you keep spending more money than what you take in, it's going to catch up to you, and it's going to cause families increased cost of living, slow economic growth, and certainly it's going to be crowding out really important functions of government. So my goal really is to have a honest conversation with some leaders in Wisconsin state government, in national government, and talk about what's the plan, where are we going, and also how do we explain these issues. So as Weston said, we can properly go around and talk about them and convince folks across the aisle, and also from a variety of age groups, that our country is heading into a fiscal disaster, and we need to make some big decisions right now.
Weston, one of the things that's often talked about is a balanced budget amendment. Is that a first step in trying to figure out this dilemma?
Well, unfortunately, it's not a realistic step. I mean, before the pandemic, we were going to run a $1 trillion deficit that was the beginning of an era of $1 trillion deficits. There was no structural reason within the long-term budget outlook. There was no reason to believe that we would ever come under a $1 trillion deficit without significant reforms. So it would be catastrophic, frankly, given the trajectory that the Biden administration would like to spend if we tomorrow, snapped our fingers and instituted a balanced budget amendment that actually had teeth. The good news here, and you really have to, kind of put your, your math in college hat on to go here. The good news is that stabilization of debt will lead to, I think, another generation of American growth and prosperity, and we won't face a debt crisis. So we don't actually have to eliminate the national debt. We can run sustainably because of the great American growth engine that is, by the way, not a result of Republicans or Democrats. Republicans and Democrats go to work every day and work their butts off. But the lack of long-term planning in Washington undermines all that. And when you get into these conversations, all too often they become theoretical. Monetary policy or this theory or that theory. One part of this that folks ought to understand, it's not theoretical at all. It's very real. And if you're a bleeding heart liberal and you're saying, oh, this young guy sounds like he wants to cut Granny's Medicare and that's terrible, we ought to be taking care of people, you need to understand that 30 years from now, and this is not my opinion, it's the Congressional Budget Office's official long-term outlook, 30 years from now, as I'm entering retirement, the interest we pay on the debt in this country will be more annually than all of Social Security. So imagine, if you fast forward, imagine the trillions of dollars that millennials are going to see spent by the federal government every year on interest. Just interest. Imagine what good that could do, but we can only avoid that massive debt crisis if we make long-term reforms now.
I love the passion on the issue. All right, CJ, so if folks want to watch this or be involved, live stream from the Bradley Foundation, it's Friday, April 23rd. Where can they go to find out more?
Sure. You can certainly go to our website at reforminggovernment.org. You can also go to the Millennial Debt Foundation, Weston's group's website. He and I and our organizations have been tweeting all about it. There's a Eventbrite, and we encourage folks to sign up for it.
And Weston, I hope to talk to you down the road. I'm also passionate about this issue, something I've talked about, fiscal responsibility from a long time ago as a former elected official and a former mayor. I think it's important that we understand the risks ahead of us if we don't start looking at these things. So thanks for taking the time. And CJ, you're also always welcome on the show. Thanks to both of you.
Thank you, sir.
Have a great weekend.